there, fellow flyers. Mark here with Wolters World, and today we're here in Los Angeles, California, outside of LAX, the airport here in LA, if you're going to be flying in. And today what I want to talk about are some of the reasons why you're going to have turbulence when you fly. Because, you know, I get nervous flying too, but knowing when turbulence will happen kind of makes me feel better that I'm like, oh, this is normal. It's supposed to happen here. Turbulence isn't strange. By knowing those things, it can help control your fear. And so I want to go through 5 different times when you should expect to have turbulence so you don't freak out when it happens, okay? And probably the biggest one you'll notice when you do fly, when there is turbulence, is when you fly through clouds. Because clouds are not just air, they are water vapor, and it's different than flying through air. So it is bumpy because there are the differences in there. So anytime you're flying, if you're going up or you're coming down through the cloud cover or you're flying through the cloud cover, don't be surprised if there's a little bumping along the way, because that is completely normal. The second time when you might notice you're gonna have turbulence when you fly is if you're gonna be flying over mountains or near mountains. Because of how the air currents go, when you have different air currents at different elevations, it has different effects. And so you might have it that your plane does get a little bumpy if you're gonna be flying over the mountains or near mountain ranges. I know if you're gonna be going into Denver, expect a few bumps. Flying into Milan, I remember the first time I took Jocelyn to Milan, we're flying in and it's all bumpy because the mountain's there. And I'd flown to Milan a number of times, so I wasn't worried. And Jocelyn was freaking out. I'm like, what's up? She's like, oh, are we gonna die? I'm like, no, it's just mountain turbulence. She's like, oh, well, you could have told me. So that's another time that you shouldn't be surprised if there's a little bumpiness when you're flying. And the thing is you could be 100 miles from the mountain range and you might already get some of the effects, okay? So if you're watching the map and say, we're not over the Rockies yet, well, it could already starting to be affecting the air and therefore the turbulence that you might be flying through. There was a Delta one, I float on them a lot, and there's been turbulence with them, but I think the third time you feel turbulence that you should kind of expect is when you're on a big Delta plane like that and you're flying across the pond and you're going to Europe, or maybe you're coming back to Europe from Europe, or you're going to Asia, and that is the turbulence when you actually are going from over the ocean onto the land, and on that coastline you actually do get some bumpiness because you do have a difference when you're flying over water versus land, and that's going to impact the air that you're flying through. And so that's why you'll get some bumpiness there as the air kind of changes that you're flying through. I know for me, I always kind of think of that bump when we get near to Europe. That's my wake-up call, because we're flying over and we get near Ireland and there's a little rattle there. I'm like, oh, what? Oh, hey, it's time to get ready. I'll actually pack up my bags to get my stuff ready because I know, oh, we're probably going to be in France in about an hour, so time to get things ready to go. And then when we're flying back, I know that bump is, oh, we're at Nova Scotia. I got another 2 hours till we're in Chicago. We're fine. And the thing is, with this turbulence, I think one thing is important for you to know is, one, the pilots know about the turbulence. They know what's coming up there. And so that's why they let you know, hey, we have some rough air up here, so be ready for it. Keep your seatbelt on. And honestly, even if the seatbelt light isn't on, you should keep it buckled, because sometimes there is, clear air turbulence. But that's one thing that, that happens, but that's not the ones I'm talking about today. And another thing is really important when you're looking at turbulence is the airplane you're flying on. Like if you're on an Airbus A380, you're probably not going to notice you're even flying because it's such a big plane. So there's very little movement, very little turbulence that you usually feel in one of those. Versus if you're in a smaller plane, then it can be a bit more bumpy. And that's why you might see, if you're taking a puddle jumper into Atlanta like we do when we're coming from our hometown, it can be a little bumpy. Then when we take off with the 747, I'm like, it's smooth sailing. What's going on? There's a different effect that turbulence has on different planes. So that's something also to consider. And if you really want to know what turbulence is if you think about it, it's actually waves of air that we're flying through. And it's when it gets rough waves of air, that's where you have the turbulence. And so yes, the plane's kind of like bouncing or skipping on the air because of the turbulence. Now, again, this is not something that should stop you from flying, because this is a normal thing. Your pilots have practiced for this hundreds of times. They know what to expect. So you'll notice when there's turbulence, you'll see the crew, they're totally chillaxed, okay? You should be chillaxed too, because you know what? They know what's going on as well, and they know you're gonna be fine. Now, our fourth kind of turbulence is what those people flying in right now might be feeling, or those people that are about to take off, and that is the turbulence and bumpiness you have at takeoff and at landing, because again, you're changing altitudes, so there's a chance for a little turbulence that way. But also, I think what's important is if when you take off and you're gonna come out of an airport and they do the turn, don't be surprised if when you take the turn after takeoff, it's a little bit more bumpy than usual. Because of the wind shear and how you're turning, that's gonna impact the plane. Now, it's not a bad thing, it's a completely normal thing, but just know, takeoff's a little bumpy, and if they take that tight turn, you might feel a little extra turbulence, okay? But it's completely normal. And what I want you to realize is these 4 types of turbulence that I see all the time when I fly, I mean, literally every single flight I've been on, these kind of turbulences do happen, is I want you to feel comfortable with it, because then you know that it's gonna happen. So you're not like, oh, why are we shaking? Oh, we're going through clouds. Oh, I realize that. Oh, what's going on? Are we okay? Yes, it's takeoff. It's a little bumpy on the takeoff. It's a little bumpy on the landing. That's normal, and that can help you feel more comfortable with flying. Because I know a fear of flying is something that keeps a lot of people from traveling, and I don't want that to keep you from traveling, because it's such a wonderful experience. And now we have the 5th turbulence you can kind of expect to have when you do fly. And this is actually a turbulence that you can actually have an idea before you get on the plane when it's going to happen in your flight. And it means you need to look at the weather forecast, because anytime you fly through a storm or you fly near a storm, within 15 to 30 miles of a storm, you might have some turbulence to go along with it. And so that's why it's important for you to kind of maybe take a look and say, oh, there's a storm over Arizona when I'm flying from Atlanta to LAX, so there might be some bumps there. Guess what? When I flew over, there were some bumps there. But what I will tell you is when you are flying and there are storms, your pilots will do their best to avoid it. They'll go around it, they'll go over it, they'll do what they can to avoid it, to keep it a safer flight, because they don't want to fly through that stuff either. And, well, and there's an Air Canada flight saying it's time to wrap this one up. I just wanted to make this video to help people that are scared of flying know the kind of turbulences that you might have when you fly, because for me, knowing the different kinds of times and different kinds of turbulence I'm going to have and when it's going to happen helps me feel better when I fly, because then I know at takeoff it's rough. When I go over the land or the water, it's going to be a little bumpy there. I know if there's a storm, we're probably going to have some shakes. That kind of knowledge can really help you conquer your fear of flying and not be grabbing that armrest going, oh my God, are we gonna die? No, you're just flying over mountains, it's okay, all right? So I hope this helps you feel a bit better about flying, so you know the different kind of turbulences you should expect. Now, there's other kinds of turbulences that are out there, and I'll let professionals talk about that. But for me as a traveler, these are the 5 types of turbulences that I see when I travel that I kind of expect to have, so I don't freak out, all right? So happy travels to you. If you are scared of flying, we will have more videos on how to conquer your fear of flying. Some people use medicine, some people use alcohol, some people sleep, some people just say, screw it, I'm traveling. So I wish you all the best and good luck flying and happy travels. And of course, bye from here in LAX.